And this is attorney Sarah Kahns, and we are estate and elder law attorneys from Hooper Law Office. Today's topic is the last in this month's theme of kind of maintaining independence, which was kind of a homage to 4th of July, the independence of our country. We've been talking about how you maintain your independence. And so today's topic is actually going to be maintaining independence and control when transitioning into a care facility. So a couple of little housekeeping matters. Number one, if you've signed up and registered for this class, there's a number of materials you'll be receiving. One of which I have in front of me here, which is a nice little graphic about planning with the house when it comes to long-term care expenses. Also, if you've registered, you have an opportunity throughout this seminar today to ask questions, which we will do our best to respond to before the end of the class. Some we might be able to field just during the class itself, and then whatever we can't get to, we will try to address to the best of our ability at the end. So please, type questions. We like this to be as interactive as possible. It's more fun for us if we know we're really helping provide the type of information that people are seeking in attending these kind of courses. But otherwise, I think we have some pretty good material for everybody. So
I think we have excellent material.
And then the last kind of housekeeping matter is next week, we kind of transition into a new group of topics, which is I guess next week's is documents for a college-aged child, things that they need to make sure are in place prior to going off into the world. Assuming they're able to these days with the pandemic. I think a lot of colleges are online. So
that's true. And honestly, it doesn't necessarily have to be a child that's leaving for college or going to be participating in secondary education.
Just 18.
Yeah.
Maybe they're still in high school when they turn 18.
we talked about it being sort of like pretend adults, the ones that are technically legal adults, but maybe haven't had a lot of experience as an adult yet. So how can we
not so independent on their own?
Yeah. How can we make sure that you can help them easily? So that's what kind of our estate planning and education focus will be.
All right, but on to today's topic, which is again transitioning into a facility and maintaining kind of control over decisions and facilities. And this is probably one of the most complicated but popular topics that we address, because it's fraught with so many pitfalls, and it's a huge concern for many, many people. And that's because most people in retirement don't have adequate income and assets to not worry about, well, what if me or my spouse, what if we suddenly have an extra $5,000 a month bill or $10,000 a month bill to provide care for one of us, or God forbid we both need care and it's a $10,000 to $20,000 a month bill. Most people, they just don't have the retirement assets to just readily afford that kind of thing. And so the concern, and what can keep people up at night, is how in the world am I going to be able to, stay at home and, afford food and just my basic lifestyle? Well, my spouse is, needing this level of care that has this giant expense attached to it. It's not to say that the care isn't valuable, but it's, how easily can we afford this without, major sacrifices to our overall retirement plan and our overall lifestyle. And that's where the planning in advance can be incredibly helpful.
I just had a conversation yesterday with the daughter of some clients that are dealing with some declines in health, memory care issues in particular. She's stepping in to help both of her parents right now. It's just one that's really starting to show some memory care problems. And she's gone through all different professionals. She's talked to people at the ADRC, which is the Aging and Disability Resource Center. She's been talking to people at the doctor's office, the geriatric care specialist, the various different agencies that she might receive assistance from, different facilities that may receive transitioning information from. And one of the things that she mentioned to me that was very helpful was, you're the only person that has mentioned my other parent in all of this. There's so much focus on my mom in this because she's the one that's declining over the next short term, that she, with her memory care issues, is likely to be suffering specific problems and is likely to need care. But what about my dad?
Yeah.
What
Dad's
happens?
going to be okay.
Right. And how do we make sure that we continue planning for him as we're planning for her? She's like, you're the only one that has mentioned my dad in all of this.
Wow.
And I appreciate the fact that you have, because sometimes he gets kind of lost in this and he's so focused on her, he doesn't think about himself. So,
yeah. And that's actually a fairly common problem with people where a spouse is in decline, that the other spouse might be, so focused on providing what the declining spouse needs, their care needs, just taking care of everything, and maybe it's mobility issues or whatever else, that they're doing so much stuff to the detriment of their own health.
mm-hmm.
And that's often what then sort of creates the need to transition into a facility, because it's, boy, mom or dad are killing themselves trying to provide appropriate care for their spouse. And sometimes they wait too long, and there's a health event with the healthy spouse prior to, that's the cause of the transition. They've kind of waited too long, and now they're both in kind of rough shape.
Right, that they didn't have that support structure. This is also why we tend to see a lot of people transitioning around the holidays. It's not because the holidays themselves are so stressful, although that does tend to happen. It's that a lot of kids tend to come home and visit. They don't realize how much care and support one of their parents is providing for the other until they're seeing them in person. And they see how much is actually being provided by the other spouse and how difficult that can be. Sometimes it's physical, that, there's a lot of lifting or a lot of actual physical assistance, like in the shower or getting in and out of chairs, out of bed, things like that, that just physically the other spouse is having trouble doing. Sometimes it's mental stress, especially with memory care. And, it can cause health declines in what was the healthier of the two spouses.
Yeah. And, in some amount of people, obviously it's the person's spouse, they love them, they're trying to provide everything that they need. But for some number of people, it's, in addition to that, they're trying to do this because they're scared of the cost of using professionals or a facility to provide the care that the loved one needs. And so hopefully we can at least provide some comfort, and in that there are ways to plan around the cost to make sure that people are going to be okay there.
We did receive a comment that I want to mention that I completely agree with. There's a variety of different support structures out there. The memory cafes is the one that was mentioned in the comments. There's a few different organizations that are incredibly active. The Alzheimer's group is they have a few different events. They do a walk every year that helps to raise awareness and also helps to raise money for research. The Fox Valley Memory Project is a little bit more about creating programs within the community. There's the Spark program, which is done through I believe it's through the Trout Museum, which is using art to try to spark different memories. Memory cafes are providing a different sort of structure for sometimes just groups to get together and talk about things related to memory care and decline. So there's
Purple Angel training as well for businesses.
Yes, Purple Angel training is something that you can do if you're a business owner, or it's something you can also do just personally. We have certification from Purple Angel, of course. It's a specialized training that you can do to make sure that if you are consistently interacting with individuals that might have memory care issues, that you're doing so in ways that they are comfortable with. So probably the most helpful example I can give is if you are offering them something to drink, if they've come into your building, you don't ask them, what do you want to drink? You ask them, would you like a glass of water? So you're not giving them infinite options. You're asking them a yes or no question or something with a limited series of options that you're presenting to them to make it easier for them to select something. So that can be very helpful in making sure that you're making interactions as positive as possible. So if you work at a business, or if you have a business, that Purple Angel training can be very helpful. The Fox Valley Memory Project is an organization that provides that training.
Yeah. So if you're looking at a transition into a facility, one of the first things that we want to make sure are in place, and this is something that we want you to be doing proactively before somebody loses capacity, ideally, is to make sure that they have basic disability documents in place, which we've done a number of different seminars, these webinars, on the various disability documents. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on those. They're available on our Facebook page to review some of that stuff. But just in general, everybody prior to losing capacity absolutely should have a power of attorney for finances, a power of attorney for healthcare, a living will, and a HIPAA authorization. And it's with those 4 documents that the person who's going to potentially need help is going to lay out, well, these are the people I trust, and these are the various powers that I give them to make sure that my family or loved ones or whoever it is that I'm going to rely on, that they have the appropriate powers to deal with my circumstances no matter what comes up in the future. It's very important if one of your concerns is transitioning into a long-term care facility and making certain that you have options to preserve enough assets for the spouse who's going to stay out in the community, or various planning options, even if it's a single person who's transitioning into a facility. You have to have good language in the power of attorney for finances to make absolutely certain that that agent can make all the various types of long-term care planning decisions on behalf of the person who's transitioning, because that person who's transitioning may not have capacity at the time that they're transitioning. So just very important that that stuff is in place, because I've had numerous instances of families, way more than I care to even think about, where there's a transition presently happening into a long-term care facility. They get a little sticker shock on, oh my God, we don't have income that's gonna allow us to be this care to be readily affordable. And so we're, dad's gonna run through all of the assets. Is mom gonna be okay? And so I ask them, hey, let's sit down and have a meeting. And I want to see what kind of planning dad has in place, because maybe he has dementia and can't sign new documents. Well, we have to have some kind of power to deal with his circumstances in order to get the best financial results. And without a power of attorney, our hands are very tied in the types of planning we might be able to do. In addition, there is nobody without this power of attorney in place that can naturally govern the finances, even to pay bills and things. And so what the family has to go through is a guardianship proceeding through the court system. And generally speaking, that's something worth avoiding. So you want to make sure that you have that planning in place so that you're able to, with the family, do the rest of the types of things that we're about to talk about here in this class.
One of the things that I also do for my clients that I think can really help position these people in the best way possible. I give my clients something that they can use to leave some sort of directions about their preferences for long-term care. If you do have to transition to a facility at some point, what do you care about with the facility? Do you want, are there certain facilities that you like or that you want to avoid? Would you want to be near relatives, or would you specifically not want to be in the same one as your brother? Are there certain things that would be a priority, like staying in a private room rather than having a roommate? If you have preferences like that, making sure that you're communicating this information to your agent is important. Having conversations is always the best way to do so. I also like providing the information through documents so that, I do a worksheet with my clients so they can leave this information to other people as well. But it's
kind of lay out the game plan for the care. What do you want? What do you don't want?
You're trying to help this person make the best decisions possible for you. And they can only do that if they have good information.
Yeah, and taking into account, because there's so many different types of facilities out there. taking into account things like, hey, I like to do a lot of activities and have a lot of interaction with people. Well, some facilities might be much more private and not do a lot of activities. And some facilities are going to have lots and lots of available activities. And so those types of preferences.
Some of them do lots of outings and whatnot, not right now, but under normal circumstances, they do.
Yeah. And so just, giving some direction is going to help make sure that your priorities, if you're struggling to express them at the time, are already memorialized and capable of being followed by your agents.
And I encourage my clients to go and do tours as well. Even if you're not at a point where you're likely to transition anytime soon, that's kind of the best time to start walking through and doing these tours, because you're able to evaluate, ask questions, participate in this process.
Definitely not this one.
And
but I like these two.
Well, exactly. And being able to leave that information with your agent, it's just invaluable, because then they don't feel like they're picking an option that you may not have approved of or you may not have liked. They're selecting something based on your preferences and what you have vetted yourself. So it's a good idea to participate in that while you still can, so that you can provide that guidance.
Yeah, and so having some of this stuff laid out, and in particular, again, the powers of attorney for finances and healthcare, living will, and HIPAA authorization, make sure that not only do we have to not be in the courtroom, and we have the powers that we need to deal with your circumstances, and you've been able to lay out your preferences and different things, but also this allows you to maintain better independence, in that you do not then necessarily have to go through a declaration of incapacity in transitioning, or having a doctor say, oh yeah, this person no longer has the ability to make decisions for themselves, so we're going to declare them incapacitated, strip authority to make any kinds of decisions away from them in order to give it to somebody else. You can actually write up your plan in such a way where you're appointing help without that necessary, hey, you're declared incapacitated. So then the person's, first of all, not at odds with the rest of the family, because I can pretty much guarantee that you don't want to have control taken away from you, or that you're declared incapacitated, but you might need some assistance. And so you want to try and walk a fine line between having your voice be heard and actually carry some weight, with getting the support that you probably need if your health is declining.
Rather than giving away authority, you're sharing it. So when you're doing this yourself and being proactive in documents, you're sharing authority with somebody else. If you're waiting and having the declarations of incapacity through a springing version of a power of attorney, or going through the guardianship process, that's more giving the power away so somebody else can exercise it on your behalf. We did have a question about HIPAA forms and where you can obtain them. Most medical facilities have HIPAA authorizations that they provide you that work for their facility. Usually they're done for purposes of like billing your insurance company and things like that. Many of them allow you to list individuals that you're okay with them having interactions with, but they may not apply to every office in that network, or they may not transition between doctors. So,
So as an example, just because somebody has a waiver for Theta Care and those physicians to talk to a couple of people in the family, it doesn't mean that when you're going into a nursing home, that the nursing home necessarily has that waiver in order to talk to those same family members, just because you signed one over at Theta.
Well, even another Theta Care clinic might not have access to it. It depends on what they exactly share within even their own offices.
So generally, what we advise people to do, and all of our own clients, we're no matter what kind of estate planning we're doing, we're always getting this component in place, is we want to make sure that we have a general HIPAA authorization in the person's estate plan, so that whatever facility they might go to, they're capable of, the family or whoever you have on that list is capable of getting information without because HIPAA is a federal law that says without written consent from the patient, they're not going to be able to talk to just whomever. Your doctor can't go golfing and start talking about how you're doing with his buddies or anything like that. And so It's just important to get that sort of stuff on file. I am not aware of any kind of boilerplate form that you can get online or anything. Generally, you're going to obtain a HIPAA authorization, one of these general ones, through whomever you're working with for your estate plan. Okay.
So if you are trying to prepare for long-term care, if you're going and touring facilities, that can also give you an opportunity to understand what the cost of that might be so that you can financially plan in the best way to afford your care. Long-term care planning is not hiding your money so that it doesn't have to be spent on care. Long-term care planning is making sure that you're able to afford your care and you can maintain good quality care equally between both spouses, and that your care continues to be paid for by you. I know a lot of my clients come in because they're worried that if they run out of money, that their kids are going to have to pay for their care, or that the kids are just going to voluntarily start paying for their care because they don't want to see mom and dad not be cared for in a good way. So it's about making sure that you position yourself in the best way possible to equally take care of both spouses and maintaining control. So
in transitioning to a facility, how you maintain independence in your choice amongst facilities is kind of in line with what Sarah's saying. Money talks. I mean, it's a lot of facilities, not all of them, but many of them are going to request financial information upon your application to go to that place, saying, well, our sort of process and requirements is that maybe you pay for a year or 18 months or 2 years out of pocket, because yes, we accept Medicaid or family care, which is a Medicaid waiver program. But for us to let you in the front door to begin with, we want to know that you're going to pay for a period of time out of pocket. And so in order to get the best results in being able to choose where your care might be, you're going to want to know ahead of time what are the requirements in that particular facility, not just for the monthly payment, but how long do you expect me to pay out of pocket to let me in here, in order to make a good decision about, number one, what you can afford, but number two, what kind of planning might be appropriate to make sure that you have enough set aside so that the spouse is still going to be okay, or that once you're in there, you have some money set aside to make sure that the person receiving care is never completely impoverished so that they can maintain a good quality of life for the rest of their life. If you transition and you just say, hey, I am just going to pay out of pocket until I'm either completely out of money or dead, well, that can be very problematic because these assistance programs can help pay for care, but they don't pay for any sort of ancillary things in somebody's life. So that can lead to some difficulty in quality of life. These programs aren't going to pay for cable or getting a haircut or going out to eat or a new bed or, just some of these things that you might take for granted that you can just naturally afford in your own life. If you're truly completely impoverished, you don't have the ability to afford any of these basic things.
And you're not necessarily going to know what it is that is going to be important at that point in your life. In my initial experience with long-term care was through my grandmother. Unfortunately, I didn't practice in this area of law at that time, so I didn't have the information that I do now. It definitely motivated me to look into it, and that also motivated my transition. But with her, and when she got to the point where she had transitioned into different levels of care, it became very important to maintain a couple of small things that gave her comfort. And, things that were recognizable to her. And there are so few things at that point that those few things became very, very important. So it became a question of, okay, this is the expense for those things. If she's down to $2,000 in assets and she has nothing more than that, how do we pay for that on a regular basis? And you want to make sure that you can provide that to somebody, because if that's all they're asking for, how do you say no? And it becomes a big point of stress in families, or it can, and just providing something real basic. And for us, one of the biggest issues was cable. That there was a particular show that she wanted to watch. She didn't understand it anymore, but it became something familiar to her because she was watching it consistently. And we wanted to make sure she could continue to do that. But how do you pay for cable? So it's little things like that you want to make sure that you've set aside funds so the family has the ability to pay for those kinds of things.
And so a few takeaways from this is a lot of people think that if you're going to do any kind of planning around the long-term care expenses, people are usually vaguely familiar with, there's a 5-year look back period and, how does that sort of stuff work? Or we don't have 5 years, my spouse needs care soon, so we can't maybe do anything. And that's all just incorrect. The 5-year look back period is for prospective planning, meaning, hey, we want to set some assets aside that we don't think we're going to need to live off of, that we want to make sure we're preserving from long-term care costs. And if you do that stuff 5 or more years in advance, anything that you might be trying to protect will be protected as long as that's done correctly. But if you do not have 5 years, that does not mean you do not have options. There are so many different options to do planning that can help preserve some amount of assets, either for a single person who's transitioning into care or for the spouse of somebody who's transitioning into care, that you do not need 5 years to get good results. Yeah, you might get the best results if you start prospectively 5 or more years in advance, but you have very powerful options that can help preserve things.
Make sure that if you're talking to somebody, that you're speaking specifically to somebody that's an elder law attorney. That's the area that is specifically this type of planning. It's not just regular estate planning that you're talking about at this point, it's elder law related planning.
Mm-hmm. And there's things like first party special needs trusts, first party pooled special needs trusts. There's ways to shift assets over to the spouse who is in the community so that they can hold on to more funds, because there's financial criteria to get assistance in paying for care. And some things are considered countable assets and some things are not. And when you talk to a nursing home, or like the social worker at a nursing home, they might be doing their best to provide you basic information about how these programs work, but this has a gigantic impact on your life. And it is not advisable to just take somebody's word for it if they're not assessing your particular finances, picking out all of the different exempt, not countable things, and then running the whole formula on, well, this is exactly, if you do nothing, this is exactly how much the state's going to allow you to keep, versus if you do some planning, this might be what we can expect to hold on to for your lifestyle and future care needs and whatever else.
There's also all sorts of exceptions when it comes to divestments and gifting, so you can use some strategies related to that. And there's also the estate recovery side of things. Sometimes people focus so much on qualifying for Medicaid, they forget about what Medicaid can come back and ask for after somebody's passed away. So you need to make sure that you're planning for all sides of the issue and you're not focusing so much on one side. Just like earlier when we said you want to make sure you're planning for both spouses equally, not just focusing on one person.
And one thing that drives me crazy is I've had a lot of clients come in after a loved one's transitioned into a care facility, and we got told by the facility we need to just spend down to $50,000 and then we apply. But the facility can't possibly know what you need to spend down to if they haven't done a full financial analysis of everything and picked out the various things that might be countable and not countable. And
if they don't know the separate circumstances of each family member as well, to know whether or not any exceptions apply. Yeah. So this is quality of life. So you want to make sure that you're getting good advice about your situation or the situation of your loved ones.
Yeah. And so to get those best results, you want to make sure that you have a power of attorney for finances in place, because you might lose capacity, and that's the reason you're going into a care facility, or your spouse might lose capacity. That's why they've gone to a care facility. And so in order to do the types of strategic planning when it's an emergency, you have to make sure you have the authority to do it. So that's why we're just beaten to death this concept of make sure your financial power of attorney is up to date and provides adequate powers to allow you to do the planning in an emergency.
We have two questions. The first one I think we can address pretty quickly. There's a question about if there's a long-term care insurance company that we recommend. We spent some time in the last session talking about long-term care insurance. And really the best advice we can give you is talk to your advisor about long-term care insurance. Yeah. You'll be able to tell just from your conversations with your advisor whether or not it's something they are well versed in. If it's something where they're talking about Medicaid and they're talking about the insurance and that they're knowledgeable on the topic, you're going to feel confident that you're getting a product that matches your needs. Yeah. And it's also not uncommon for them to bring in a specialist from the company regarding long-term care insurance. So if they do that, you know that you're probably getting somebody that has a good background in long-term care insurance specifically. You might want to ask whether or not they have that and encourage them to bring that person in right from the beginning. Yeah.
And you should also know that if your takeaway from that conversation with your current advisor is, boy, they don't really seem to know what they're talking about. There are advisors out there who kind of specialize, as Sarah was saying, in long-term care planning, maybe not at the company that your advisor's at, but they are out there. So we don't have a particular company, but we work with a lot of advisors and have a pretty good sense of, who knows this stuff better than others.
We meet with a lot of advisors and we look over a lot of policies for our clients. So when you interact with your advisor, you'll be able to feel confident, or you're going to feel like you need to get another opinion.
And then one question was, are stocks and bonds excluded from the spend down? The answer is generally no. That's very likely a countable asset. Depending on whether or not those stocks or bonds are in a retirement account, can in some instances change that analysis. So it's not because it's stocks or bonds, but whether or not those stocks or bonds are in a retirement account. But generally speaking, stocks or bonds are going to need to be spent on care, or at least if there is a spouse, they're a countable asset to go into the formula as to whether or not they need to get spent down. But again, generally, stocks and bonds are countable assets. And the last question was, long-term care insurance is through Northwestern Mutual. Is it good? I don't know.
I had one client with a policy through Northwest Mutual, and they had a good experience using it.
Yeah,
I can tell you that.
Without talking to a person about their own particular situation and the policy that they have purchased or are looking at purchasing, it's kind of impossible to say whether or not the policy is appropriate for your circumstances. There's no way to say, blanket, oh yeah, Northwestern, they're great. I think they're a good company, but I have no clue whether or not the policy is the best for your circumstances.
And then there is the question, like an IRA. Yes, like an IRA. I mean, I think that was in regard to when you said if the stocks and bonds are part of a retirement account.
Oh, yes, like retirement account. Yeah.
Like an IRA.
IRA,
yes.
401k, 403b. Any of that sort of designated Roth. Retirement account, Roth. That would all be treated the same under the rules. So again, it's not just that if a stock is in an IRA, it's safe. Or not in an IRA, then it's not safe, but it can play into whether or not you're talking about a countable asset.
You're welcome.
Okay.
We got to thank you.
So I think we've covered all of the questions that we have on the list here, and we're out of time. So, if anything that we just talked about today is real applicable to your own personal circumstances, and you want to talk to an attorney who focuses in this area of law, as Sarah and I do, please feel free to contact our office. We provide initial consultations where we go pretty in depth into this stuff, free of charge for the initial consultation. So hopefully you understand that you have options if you're facing care and ways to maintain independence. So now do something with that info, you know, and hopefully we dispelled the myth of, oh, if we don't have 5 years, there's no planning that can be done, because that is just simply not true. And we want to get the word out there that if people are facing care costs, they do still have options. So if you take away nothing else, if you know that a power of attorney is important and that you have options in facing care costs, I'm happy with the job we did.
Absolutely.
So we really appreciate your time. We hope you found this to be a good use of your time. And please, any feedback, if you found this useful, you know, we love to hear from the attendees on how we're doing with these things.
Or if you have any suggestions for topics, we're still selecting topics for our sessions coming up through the end of this year.
Yep.
So if there's anything that you want to hear about, please don't hesitate.
The best part of our job is teaching these classes, and usually we do this stuff in person so we can have some interaction. But these days, this is the best alternative we have. So
if there's anything you want to hear about, please don't hesitate to let us know on our Facebook page or through email. Just give us a list of topics that you want to hear about, and hopefully we can get it incorporated into our schedule.
Right.
Otherwise, we have estate planning and education coming up over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully you find that interesting.
Yeah. So next class is going to be August 5th at noon, and we hope to hear from many of you and that you participate. So thanks everybody for your time, and everybody take care and stay safe.
Have a good day.